Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor, and in line with my commitment to honor Black History Month, I am featuring another Black artist named Bisa Butler. I got this book a couple days ago, and turns out this is a catalog of an exhibit that Butler did at the Chicago Art Institute. I think that's what it's called, Art Institute of Chicago, 4 or 5 years ago. So the reason why I thought she would be great to profile in terms of fiber art is because her primary medium is quilting, and it's interesting because I'm editing book 3 and I'm just now at the chapter where I first mentioned a quilter in the fiber artists family. So kind of makes sense to talk about quilting now. Now, quilting is something that I really want to take up. I haven't had the time and the energy yet to do it. But with art like this, I am definitely inspired. In fact, I watched a couple of videos of Butler, and one of them illustrated her process and how she goes about making these works of art. So I'll try to explain just my takeaways from having read this book and gone through it and watched a few videos and what I've learned about her. She's fascinating. She used to be a high school teacher, and if I'm not mistaken, her BFA is from Howard University, and she got a master's degree at Montclair State, where I actually interviewed for a job a long time ago, over like 25 years ago. Now, she takes photographs. Let me see if I can pull out a few examples. Clearly, as you can tell just in the few pictures I've held up, she wants to raise the profile of her own culture, ancestry as a Black woman who is, more or less responding to some of the holes in the historiography of art and culture that have affected Black makers, Black artists. And one of the things that she goes into in her, when she talks about art, is how the craft of quilting was always relegated to secondary status and reduced to not being an art, right? Because art was traditionally, and to a degree still is, the province of white males. Now, just to give you an idea of her process, so I'm going to show you a photo. Negro Boys on Easter Morning, Southside Chicago from 1941. That is the name of the photo. So this would be, I might regard this as kind of a found object, but she deliberately looks for photos that serve her artistic purpose. And now my task is to find the quilt that she made based on this picture, and is called Southside Sunday Morning. Now, I can try to point out a few things. She elevates these young men with her art through color, and she also adds a lot of details that are in the original picture. So the original photograph, well, there's some description in here. The young man in the foreground with his arms folded powerfully confronts us and arrests our attention. The men behind him move rhythmically into our space, equally cool and self-reliant. Just another view of that picture. Again, this is from 1941. And one of the dimensions, the historical dimensions that I was reading about as I took in this book, was her effort to sort of profile Black people and how they navigated their historical and social experience. So a lot of Black people moved from the South to the North, and Chicago had a significant population in the South side of Black people, and they developed, their own peculiar community and culture within that location. And we see the result of that in this, among many other photos. The photograph here, the photographer is credited with achieving an effect of dynamism that extends beyond the static nature of the photograph. And Butler uses these figurative poses to communicate messages about power, mood, human reaction, and relationships. And you can see you know, there are a lot of details that she kept, especially with regard to the poses of the young men. She really seeks out photographs that show the dignity of the people, and her use of color is distinctive. When I was looking at a video that went through her process, she showed how she uses some tools, computerized tools, to bring out the values of the light and shadow in the photographs, and she uses the black and white in order to accomplish that. And if there are lighter areas that show up, you know, for, you know, light and shadow, like I have, you know, light over here and I have some shadow over here, she would assign then certain colors to those places, in particularly in the portrait of the person, maybe their body parts, their arms or hands or whatever, and then assign colors largely based on what she perceived as the emotions expressed by the figures in the photographs. For example, she was talking about how red is for her a color that draws out the blood and power and will and determination, whereas the blue, so if we see the young man closer to the center, that would express either a depressive type of state or maybe just a calm, cool, and collected type of state. So she uses color as a language to dig into the emotions of the people that she's trying to portray, and also to move beyond race. So there's an effort, and in this book I read, there's one article in here about Faith Ringgold as a huge influence on Bisa Butler. Faith Ringgold used kind of an exercise where she totally eliminated white from her palette because she wanted to emphasize the luminescence of black skin, and show that it, you know, even shades of darkness have color and hue and value, and are almost informed by their opposite in a way that sort of prefigures the opposite approach of Bisa Butler, with using very bright colors, very vibrant colors, to bring out what's going on in the minds and the characters of the people. Let's find some more examples. These are just, I'll link a link where you can find this book. Here's one. So this picture is from a similar time period, 1941, Southside Chicago, called Part of the Easter Parade. So we have here 3 women who are engaged in what is argued to be gossiping, you know, developing a sense of community, of solidarity by telling stories about their friends with each other. And there's a lot going on when you consider, you know, just the emotional dispositions of these 3 women. It's very potent. And also their dress says a lot about who they are and who they aspire to be. And here we have, this is from 2017, entitled The Tea, her quilt rendering of this photo. So I apologize for there's a bit of glare. That's sort of inevitable. I'm not a professional photographer, alas. As you can see, I'll try to get in a little bit closer so you can see some of the details. But one of the things that is very obvious is that Butler uses fabric to alter and elevate the garments worn by the figures in the photos. So in the original, we saw solid colors. We saw relatively simple dress, you know, informed by the way that the clothes drape, the quality of the fabric, the cut, the fashion statement. But in the quilt, we are seeing all kinds of gorgeous detail, pattern, color emerge, and just sort of transform the figures from the photographs into people who are replete with symbolic references. A lot of the fabrics that she uses are from Africa. Her father, as I read, is, I'll probably pronounce it wrong, he was from Ghana, so Ghanaian. And she references Ghana fabric, color, tradition in the choices that she makes with regard to the fabrics that she uses in her quilts. And a lot of times there are symbols. Now, these weren't necessarily explained in the articles that I read that are in the book. And I didn't read a whole lot beyond this book. But here is another fantastic quilt. I mean, it's just, the colors are to die for. I just am blown away. When I listened to an interview of her, the commentator said, wow, you use really bold colors. And she said, I'm a child of the 70s. Of course I use bold colors. She was born in 1973. And there is symbolism, and I read about some of that. For example, this is a couple getting married, and apparently there's some commentary here regarding, I think it's her grandparents, regarding the lack of access on the part of enslaved people to marriage ceremonies on a par with what their, the people who claim to own them would have access to. So this man, his pink pants have giant rings on them as a symbol of the, ring exchange between a man and a woman when they marry. And I'm intrigued by the fans. The fans weren't brought out in the readings that I did, but I kind of found myself questioning what they could refer to, because they occur in more than one quilt. Now, this couple dates back at least a century. But the fans, I'm thinking that's probably something that came around the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, something like that. It's anachronistic. Just makes me wonder if it symbolizes. One of the things I heard her say was that she likes to take care of the people in her photographs. So to the extent that we picture people without means in the heat, suffering from, sweat, whatever heat, prostration. And, I remember when I was little, growing up in Alabama, seeing people use, hand fans in an unair conditioned church. But she is providing this man with fans, electric fans, that would not have existed in his day as a means of taking care of him. Let me see if I can find another example of that. There is one picture where she has, I'm actually not sure it's in this specific catalog. In any case, I found one picture that she quilted, and in the original picture, the young man in the front had no shoes, but in her quilt, he had shoes. And she explained it as her effort to provide the person in the photo with what they need in order to thrive. Because a lot of times they didn't have access to that. Let me see if I can find any more specifically photos that are converted into the quilts, because the transformation is really fascinating. It tells a huge story about what she's trying to share as an artist. The title of the photograph I'm about to show you, it's by Dorothea Lang, Negro in Greenville, Mississippi from 1936. Here is the man. And he, even in the photo, apparently this was one of several takes, and this was the one that Butler chose to memorialize in her quilt. He's being portrayed as someone who is probably a working man. He's got patched pants. He has little in the way of wealth, but he is nonetheless a philosopher, a thinker, a human being deserving of dignity and respect, capable of deep thought, etc. And here is a close-up of the quilt. And this, if you look closely, I'll try to reduce the glare to the best of my ability, but if you can kind of see her stitching. So going back to her process, so I said that she would record the values of the light and dark areas on especially the person's face. And obviously here we can also see his hand, and then even the other hand down here. Interestingly, in the quilt, he is holding the hand. In the original picture, he just has the, I'm sorry, he has the hat. He's holding the hat. And in the original picture, the hat is just adjacent to him. You can see that there. So she changes a few details, and doubtless, if I were to, you know, invest more time, I could probably explore more of these alterations that she made. But going back to her use of color, so she'll figure out the values from white to black, all the grays in between. She'll assign colors to those. And she uses an applique process. It's interesting because the first article in this book suggested that the white establishment art historians went out of their way at one point to assign a spot in the art world to pieced quilts that somehow made them rise, you know, on rare, exceptional occasion to the status of art, dare I say, white male painting type of art. But they did not historically apply this standard to applique quilt. And that is the technique that Bisa Butler uses. She does applique. And in one of the videos that I saw, she demonstrated how she cuts very, you know, small pieces and arranges them one on top of the other. And, you know, for example, we could probably, you know, get some idea in the man's face of how she does that. And then she stitches them down with, I want to say, a long arm quilting machine. I saw the machine. It looked like, again, I'm not a quilter, you can tell, but it looked like a very high-end long arm quilting machine with probably some kind of computing. And, you know, she ran it across her final product that was all pieced together. And then she might even use some details, like if you look at the threading in the man's temple, like in this area here, you can see how she used the applique process with the stitching to bring out some of the shapes that are forming the various, you know, facial features. And in the hair, sometimes she would do stitches that would bring out the curly nature of the character's hair. And you can see in the background how there's also sort of a fanciful use of stitching that adds to the, I want to say, sort of Baroque brocade type look of the background. The pants I read on this man, which I want to say is James Baldwin. If I'm wrong, don't shoot me. In any case, I was reading about how the figure who is in this painting this quilt, lived abroad because that was where the man had the freedom to be the philosopher and writer that they aspired to be. So the airplanes on his trousers are symbolic of that. So that's another use of symbolism in the fabrics that she picked to bring out attributes of the figure in the quilt that hint at their, you know, whatever special talents, extraordinary abilities, aspirations, etc. pertain to them. Here on the end leaf, we have just an exquisite image from, it's a detail from a quilt. And her use of color, I just find absolutely astonishing and frankly inspiring. Makes me seem quite simplistic for just, you know, graduating to purple in my octopus sweater. But it is a bolder use of color than what I typically see. And I'm inspired when I see this caliber of art to go further. Let me see what else would be exciting. This whole book I highly recommend. Here's a portrait called The Equestrian. And this is a very elegant, sophisticated woman who's, again, you know, her dignity is being emphasized, and her claim to a rich life, to flourishing, really, is being drawn out with the fabrics that are used. Again, we see the airplane motif on this fabric. I didn't read specifically about the plants and leaves, etc., the botanical kind of references that are in some of these fabrics. But I suppose I could speculate that there are references there to thriving and flourishing and that sort of thing. There are a couple of quilts where she has a fabric that incorporates pictures of Nelson Mandela, which is kind of intriguing. Here is a man, this is called A Man's Worth, 2019, with a deliberate use of the word worth in the title to indicate that this individual has earned, just by being who he is, the opportunity to be valued and respected by others. And he's got euro signs on his clothing, which is an interesting expression of worth, but at least it's an allusion to the fact that we do tend to assign monetary worth to people for better or worse, and everyone should have equal access to that. Let me see here. This is an extraordinary portrait of 4 women. I know why the caged bird sings. There go the dogs. Ari's in here just hanging out. He's as quiet as a mouse. Isn't that just exquisite? The use of color, the use of symbolic fabrics, African motifs. We see hearts on one woman. It's hard to see these. Oh, the red shoes are a reference to Michelle Obama. Apparently there was a moment when she wore shoes similar to that to assert her position, and Bisa Butler incorporated that into the fabric for the one woman's skirt. And on this side we have what? All right. Yes. We have a dog friend. We have a visitor. Ari, you don't need to go ballistic. All right, Summer. Summer needs to get on the floor. So they are a reference to earrings in a very large dimension that would have been worn by Butler's Ghanaian ancestors. That is what I read in the article about this particular quilt. And in Survivor from 2018, it reminds me remotely of Hannah Rugen with her political protest. In Survivor, Bisa Butler tackled the issue of female genital mutilation and condemned it. So the woman in the middle has gone through that procedure, and she has 2 women at her side comforting her. And there are, again, a lot of symbolic references. I understand that the hand in the middle, the white hand, is a gesture that suggests stop, that this practice should be stopped. We see that the women, their faces are largely characterized by a blue hue to suggest sadness. There's also a great deal of care. Those doggies, they're so demanding. Care being hinted at in the, just the way that the women are holding their companion in the middle, and more. It's beautiful the way that she uses fabric to convey the garments worn by these women, the traditional African garments. You're making the whole camera shake, scratching yourself that way, Ari. Maybe I'll find 1 or 2 more. Here's one. 1 vote can change the world, and this is from 2008. In, I guess celebration would be the right word, of the election of a black president in the United States, President Obama. 1 vote can change the world. And there was some discussion in the article about the use of the American flag, which is a tradition. They mentioned there, Jasper Johns has done it, Faith Ringgold, David Hammonds, Barbara Kruger. Old Glory became a vehicle for aesthetic, cultural, and political address. So it is definitely functioning as, a reference to being American, being in America. This is an interesting era for being an American because, you know, a lot of us want to assert our identity as Americans, but we are very dismayed by the current leadership in the country. And so there's this challenge, this kind of, what do I want to say, tension between, you know, American cultural, historical identity versus the whole political situation and the power structures that are obviously not something a lot of us want to identify with because they are oppressive and they foster injustice. So I can't tell you how extraordinarily impressed I am. I'm just gonna look at one more quilt. I invite you to explore this artist further. It's just extraordinary. And to think she was a high school teacher and she just started doing this on the side, and just her talent was blowing people out of the water, and all of a sudden she's being exhibited in some of the most important art museums in the United States. This is from a photograph portraying a family that is leaving, that left for Liberia. There was a sort of movement under a man named Marcus Garvey, who oversaw this kind of push for Black people who were descendants of enslaved Blacks and had, you know, were also enslaved. This was conceived as a settlement for freeborn and previously enslaved Black Americans, Liberia. And so this family, the quilt is called Black Star Family. That was the name of the boat that carried families to Liberia in this period. We're looking at a family that's portrayed as being from the 1920s, so about a century ago. Black Star Family, first class tickets to Liberia, and this was done in 2018. It's intriguing to see, you know, the fiery woman on the one hand, and then over here we have the young man who is looking maybe a little bit less optimistic, but in any case, this is portraying a wealthy family with the means to undertake this voyage and the agency to aspire to making a better life for themselves by returning to Africa in a country that is run by people like them who are also Black. So again, a lot of extraordinary symbolism, and this is an example of the use of Mandela, obviously anachronistic, but you can see in the father's jacket there are pictures of Nelson Mandela in the fabric. So a kind of there's almost an effort to eternalize the people in the original photographs by, on the one hand, harking back to the experiences that led them to be where they are, but also projecting into the future of the kind of life that they may have and aspire to, and the sort of overarching community, like the arc of justice that they are a part of. So yeah, Bisa Butler. This book is called Portraits. I'll link this book. It's probably out of print. I'm not positive if, you know, if this is, I frankly, I'm not sure where this came from. It's one of those Amazon things where they find somebody who has it, and it came really quickly. But I'm thrilled with this book. It basically is a catalog retrospective of the exhibit at the Chicago Art Institute. And it's beautiful. This is like a fabric binding. It's printed in Italy. And it's not terribly long. I read the whole thing in an afternoon. But as you can tell, the illustrations are just gorgeous. So I hope you would consider exploring the art of Bisa Butler a little bit further. It's truly inspiring. And you'll probably run across some of the influences that helped her to make the art that she did, the people who came before her. And I just have to assume, you know, she's what, 50, right? 53. She should be able to continue making this art for a good while. It's just exquisite. So I hope y'all have a really good week. We'll be back with more knitting and yarn, etc. Y'all take care. Bye.